بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The voice. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. So we said that sometimes there are contradictions between the texts or the evidences. And we said when there is a contradiction between a text, a hadith that is very explicit and specific, and someone that not very explicit, but your impression of it, the impression of it is this or that. What do we call the impression that you get from the hadith, the impression? Dhuhur, the apparent meaning. You see a hadith, you read it, or you listen to it, and you get an impression. That impression, whether the hadith is telling you don't do or do, that impression is called dhuhur. الظهور. So sometimes the message is very clear, very explicit, very obvious, very specific, and sometimes it's not. Your impression of it is to do or not to do. Your impression of it is this is mandatory or recommended, or prohibited, haram, or undesired. Your impression, not you or me, the fuqaha, the jurist. So that is dhuhur. Now if we have a clash between these two, the explicit and the apparent meaning, which one we take? The explicit, the qat'i. The qat'i, which is the explicit, and sarih and qat'i. Now we come to the second example. When one of them is general and the other is what? Khas, specific. Which one we take? And there is a clash between them. The general says you must do this. The specific says no. In certain cases you don't have to do this. It's not mandatory on you. Definitely we take the more specific because it is translating, explaining what is general. Always the specific comes to translate the meaning of the general. Or if it is what? Beside am, what do we have?
Restricted and unrestricted.
Ahsant. Mutlaq and muqayyad. Again, mutlaq says honor every poor person. But then the muqayyad says honor the believing poor people, mu'mineen, not just any one of them. So we take the second one, okay? Because it restricts what the unrestricted says. And then we have the fourth example. What was the fourth example when they conflict with each other?
Unruly and overruling.
Exactly. Hakim and mahkum. And the process is called
Hukuma.
hukuma. Okay? That one of them, the example of hakim and mahkum, what was the example? Do you remember? Huh? Exactly. The Hajj. Hajj has been ordained وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ upon people. An-nas, all of them. Hajjul Bayt. But then the same ayah which is attached. This is qarina which is attached, not detached. An indication that is attached. مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Then you have to have the prerequisite for Hajj as istita'a, financial ability, physical ability, okay, security ability. So istita'a, if there is no istita'a, someone could not make enough money to go, then he or she would not go. So this is hakim and mahkum. Now we come to today. There are other examples. other examples of conflict. Today it says بين دليل لفظي ودليل من نوع آخر. One of them, okay, is verbal. So the evidences, some of them are verbal and some of them are what, my friends? Non-verbal. And also we have rational. These are the evidences. Evidences. أدلة. الأدلة. See, Sister Tahira. الأدلة. See? الأدلة. Okay? Dal. الأدلة. So, now, if we have verbal and the other one is non-verbal, or sometimes we have two evidences, both of them are non-verbal. These also have some principles and rules. Rule number one. It says that the definite verbal evidence cannot be contradicted by a definite rational evidence. See, let me write them down. The definite verbal evidence does not contradict with the rational, the definite rational, the definite one. Evidence.
How do you differentiate, say, between rational and irrational? I'm sorry, between definite and indefinite? Rational?
Definite. What is the opposite of definite? Possible. احتمال. But this one is قطعي. This one is قطعي. This one is certain. 100%. While the opposite of it is not قطعي. Is possible. احتمال. The evidence sometimes 100% gives you the answer. 100%. Beyond doubt. It's called قطعي. While sometimes it's possible 70% you think that it says yes, maybe 30% it's no. 70% says wajib, 30% you cannot say this is definite 100%. But when it's definite, it is beyond doubt. Very clear. No two people are going to argue, when it comes to definite. Both of them, every scholar says this is قطعي. This is certain. Okay, that's the meaning of it.
But can say this for the verbal one is, I can understand the rational, isn't the rational?
What is the rational? Let's speak about what are the rational evidences. We studied that in the first year. I'll give you an example. One example of the rational is what?
The obligation cannot contradict with the haram.
Exactly. There is no way that the shara, rational, the aql says, reason says, no way he can tell you do this and at the same time he says don't do this. In the same circumstances, of course. Sometimes the circumstances are different. Okay, I'll give you an example. Sometimes the shara says, the lawgiver says, don't drink this liquid. Don't eat this food. This is haram. But then at the time of emergency, he says, yes, you can eat to survive. So what had been haram before, during special circumstances, becomes what? Halal. إِلَّا مَضْطُرِرْتُمْ إِلَيْهِ. Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, unless it's a state of emergency and you have no choice, but in order for you to survive, you can eat. Then you can eat. It's okay. It becomes halal. But just for you halal, not for others. Because you are in special circumstances. But at the same time, same circumstances, one thing is halal and haram at the same time. This is not. Why? Because we studied in the rational evidences, one of the laws, امتناع اجتماع الأمر والنهي. It is the impossibility of the concurrence at the same time of a prohibition and commands when it comes to something. Okay? The prohibition, imtina', doesn't happen. It does. This is the brain tell me, not God. This is not Sharia. The brain tells me, reason, aql tells me, it's impossible that the commander tells you when it comes to something specific under the same circumstances and you are the same person, he tells you do and not don't do. He would not say that. Where do we take that from? We take that from the conflict between علاقة التضاد, the conflict between day and night. At the same time here, last night we were at the church. So when I entered the church, it was evening, 7 p.m. So the pastor said, good morning. And I said, yeah, so sorry, good evening. I said, no, it's okay, good morning, not for us, for people in Europe. It's okay. But at the same time, in Orange County now, it is day and night at the same time, impossible. Yes, it's day in Europe, in Asia now, Australia. It's day for them. It could be somewhere on earth, it's the day and the night. But in the same geographic area, you say now it's night and day at the same time, doesn't happen. Or something, this one, you say it's a black and white at the same time. No. Yes, part of it black, part of it black, part of it white, yes. It happens. But the whole thing, this one, is a black and white at the same time? No, it can't. There is contradiction. علاقة التضاد. The premise, the rational premise states that it is impossible for two things who contradict each other to be there at the same time. Because they contradict each other. They cannot be. One of them has to leave in order for the other to come. It's like the day and the night. The Quran says, لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك فمحونا آية الليل وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة. We cancelled, abrogated the sign of the nights, so we brought the sign of the day. But at the same time, day and night doesn't happen. Does not happen. Okay? Same thing with hurma and wujub. Hurma and wujub at the same time for the same subject and the same and under the same circumstances, it's impossible. This is not a religious ruling. This is a rational ruling. Rational, aqli, not shar'i. Has nothing to do with religion. Okay? What is the second example of rational? That we understand it without sharia. Aqli. The evidence is rational. We have 3-4 examples we took. The necessity relation. Necessity relation. This is another aqli. The necessity relation. Between what? Exactly. Between cause and effect. Between cause and effect. Such as the cause is what? Is Fire. The effect is heat or smoke. Okay? So when we see the heat, even if you don't see the fire with your eyes, imagine you are blindfolded. You come to a place and there is heat. Automatically your brain is going to say there is a fire. Okay? There is a fire. Or sometimes you don't see but you smell. Some people smell the smoke. They say, wow, I can smell it. They know there is a fire. Why? Because always the effect لا يتخلف عن علته. المعلول, which is effect, معلول, the result, is not separated from its cause. المعلول لا يتخلف عن العلة. This is a rational premise. Every rational human being, be it believer or non-believer, believes in this. Okay? This is something that happens automatically. معلول and علة. That's the second, the necessity relation. And we call it in Arabic, علاقة التلازم. The other one, the first one between day and night was tadad, conflict or contradiction. Contradiction between day and night at the same time. This one, no, this is exactly the opposite, talazum. التلازم, علاقة التلازم. That whenever there is an effect, you see a cause behind it. There is nothing without reason. And this is mentioned in the Quran, by the way. It's mentioned in chapter 18, Surah Al-Kahf, فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. Allah says, always the effect follows the cause. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. For everything there is a cause. Nothing comes from vacuum. Sometimes, chapter 18, Surah Al-Kahf. Sometimes, some husband or wife or couples, they complain about her husband. He's this. And then I tell her why. She says, no, there is no reason. I say impossible. You are not telling me the whole story. There is nothing, whether it is physical or social or spiritual, every effect has a cause. This is a law in the Quran. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. That is aqli. This is a rational evidence. This is a rational. God has given you the brain, and the brain says, yes, definitely, I can see these experiments every single day in my life. Every effect has a cause, and every cause is followed by an effect. Every cause also is followed by effect. What is the third? Give me another aqli evidence that has nothing to do with religion. It's independent. The aql independently states that this should be this.
Priority and posteriority.
Exactly. Meaning that when I switch the light, okay, if I want to turn off the light, I have to push that button. First, the light is turned off second. Even sometimes it takes fraction of a second. Okay? But one of them is first, the other is second. The other one is تلازم بين وجوب الشيء ووجوب مقدمته. Also there is a necessity. When something becomes important, okay, the introduction to it also becomes important or wajib. Such as what? Exactly. The example of wudu. If you want to pray, then, and the shara is telling you, listen, لا صلاة إلا بطهور. No prayers can be accepted or okayed without tahur, wudu. In that ablution. In that case, you know that ablution becomes wajib. Okay? Because it's muqaddama, prerequisite. Prerequisite for the requisite. Every requisite has prerequisite. And if the requisite is wajib, the prerequisite becomes mandatory too. Wajib too. How do we know this? The aql says, because you can't do that if you don't do the first. If you don't do the pre, you cannot do the requisite. So you have to do the pre, then followed by the requisite. Now, we come to an evidence, bless you, الدليل اللفظي القطعي, definite verbal evidence. Can it contradict the definite rational evidence? What do you think, Tahira? One says yes, one says no.
No contradiction.
No contradiction. Cannot, because why? Both of them are what? Look at this. قطعي. Both of them. Yes, if one of them was not definite, yes, they do contradict. But when both of them are elevated to the status of definite, then they cannot crash with each other. They go in harmony. وَكُلُّ مَا حَكَمَ بِهِ الشَّرْعِ حَكَمَ بِهِ الْعَقْلِ. Everything that كُلُّ مَا حَكَمَ بِهِ الْعَقْلِ حَكَمَ بِهِ الشَّرْعِ. العقل. I correct myself. كُلَّ مَا حَكَمَ بِهِ الْعَقْلِ. Everything the sound reason says this is good, definitely the religious one is going to endorse it. Why? There is no conflict between aql and shar'. No conflict. So this is premise number one. This is premise number one. I'll give you an example. What does aql say about killing an innocent person? Not guilty, innocent. Someone who has done nothing. Does human reason say it's okay to kill, murder, or it's not okay? It's not okay. Okay? Therefore, religion again reiterate this. But why it's mentioned in the Quran? It's not mentioned to establish something in you. No. It is mentioned for what? A reminder. Are you with me? Because Allah says, I have given you brain. You don't wait for me to tell you this is wrong. If I mention it in the Quran or the Hadith, it is just to remind you, not to establish something in you, because it has been already established from day one, thousands of years ago. I have given you brain. Your brain tells you this is wrong. Or, الظلم قبيح. Wrongdoing, injustice is ugly. God does not need to mention this in the Quran. But if He mentions this somewhere in the Quran, it is just a reminder. It's a reminder. It's like the housekeeping rules. When you go to a conference, when you go, they remind you, because you're coming to a place to learn. You could not bring your sandwich while the lecturer is speaking. The aql says it's not right, okay? Or you cannot allow kids to roam, all over the place and shout and yell and scream. Mothers, they have to know this. But if they mention it here, they are not establishing new rules. They are reinforcing what has been already established. So, because if they clash, suppose someone say, no, they clash. What does that mean? It means, God forbids, either the ma'soom who's giving us the text, because this is verbal text, okay? Hadith. Hadith which is qat'i. Nobody fights over this hadith. They know 100% that the Prophet, the Imam said this, the ma'soom. If it clashes with the rational evidence, then either God forbids, the ma'soom is lying, which is not impossible for the ma'soom to lie, or there is some defect in the brain. The brain does not understand, does not function well. And both of them are wrong. The sound brain functions well, okay, gives good answers, and the ma'soom does not lie. Therefore, you cannot find, in the fiqh, you cannot find such example. Verbal and rational, both of them definite, they clash. You don't find this. You don't find this example in the Sharia. Okay? We go to the second. By the way, this text has to be what? Definite and what? Definite and what? Can you add something here? Definite and explicit. Exactly. Sorry. Yes, it is. It is, of course. But to be, more accurate. It is explicit too. Explicit and definite, both, okay? So, here we don't have that example in Sharia. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The second example, when there is a conflict, let's take this out. Let's take this one out, like room. So that does not happen. This is the first one. It doesn't happen. Okay. Now, there is a conflict between a verbal evidence and non-verbal. Verbal and non-verbal. Okay? Verbal and non-verbal. Who do we put first? The priority goes to which one?
And they're both definite again?
Let's say definite, but one of them is verbal, one of them is non-verbal.
Verbal.
Exactly, it goes to the verbal.
So what is non-verbal?
Non-verbal is taqreer. I'll give you an example. Taqreer, consent. It means consent. The consent of the Prophet, the consent of the Ma'soom. What does that mean? It means someone did something in front of the Prophet or the Imam, and the Prophet did not tell him. We studied this long time ago. The Prophet did not say to him, "Oh, this is haram, stop it." He was silent. When he is silent, when you are doing something right before him, then this means consent. Otherwise, his duty is to tell you. The duty of the Prophet, لِتُبَيِّن. Remember, always the Quran says, you have to explain. Me and you and others, sometimes people do something wrong, we say we don't care. This is not my responsibility. But the Prophet is different. The Imam is different. They have to speak. Okay? So consent. Non-verbal is consent. So if we have verbal and non-verbal, then we give a priority to what? To the verbal. Now, if we have verbal and non-definite. Non-definite. Again, we give the priority to which one?
Sorry, non-definite, which one? Non-definite.
Verbal.
Verbal. Oh, then definite verbal versus.
Yes,
non-definite.
yes.
Of course,
So the verbal, why? Because the verbal is hujjah. Is binding. Okay? Or a proof. Hujjah. Okay? While the non-verbal, my friends, the non-verbal, let's go to the non-verbal. The non-verbal, sometimes it's not hujjah. Why? I ask you why. The verbal is hujjah, but the non-verbal is not always hujjah, proof, or evidence, or binding. Why? What's the difference between them?
Depends on the situation?
Exactly, because sometimes someone does something non-verbal and the Imam for some reason could not speak, could not say to him yes or no. Okay? So if we have something verbal and explicit, then we have to take that one. Above what? Above something which is not verbal and not explicit. We always take the verbal. Verbal has more power, more value, more power. So evidence number one is verbal. Then we go to the non-verbal. So if they clash, that does not mean we do not accept the non-verbal. We does accept it in case they clash. See, I put the X. In case there is ta'arud, contradiction, we resort to the verbal one. Otherwise, we take the non-verbal. We take it. Because we said the evidence are either lafzi or غير lafzi. Before we went to the rational, when we were speaking about the types of evidences, we said number one, evidences, we come. Number one, lafzi or غير lafzi, verbal and non-verbal, and then we went to the aqli. Okay? But we speak about the case of conflict, of course we're going to take the verbal one. Why they say the verbal is more powerful than non-verbal? Because the verbal one is most of the time is قطعي. While the non-verbal, not necessarily always قطعي. Not necessarily always قطعي. And once the verbal becomes قطعي, it becomes automatic. What it becomes? Huh? حجة, exactly. It becomes حجة. Automatically becomes حجة when it is definite. Proof. Becomes proof. Then you have to follow it. Okay? Now we come to the third case. Third case. إذا عارض الدليل اللفظي غير الصريح, the non-explicit verbal evidence. See, let me put it on the board. It's better. Non-explicit. The non. Here we have non-explicit verbal evidence is a clashing with what? With rational, definite evidence. With the rational, definite evidence. Which one we give a priority to?
School of Ahlul Bayt says rational, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We give. Because this is, see, non-explicit. If this was explicit, would that be possible?
No.
I'll say that again. If that was, we remove the non-explicit verbal evidence. Would that be possible to clash with the rational? No. We said earlier. In this case, if it is non-explicit, then definitely we go for the rational definite evidence. Why? Because the rational definite evidence are hujjah. Why it is hujjah? Because it is definite. When you put this definite, it means it's hujjah. It means it's beyond doubt. Beyond doubt. It's very clear. There is no doubt. 100% you know the answer. Whether halal, haram, it gives you when you put definite, قطعي. And we mentioned the first day of this class that when you reach قطع, certainty, you cannot back down. Okay? Because this is qat'. Why? Because God says don't go opposite to your reason. You cannot go opposite to your reason. When you know this road 100% leads you to your destination, you cannot be hesitant and say, no, I'm going to go through that. This is qat'. And qat' is always hujjah, proof. When you reach qat', God says this is binding. I'm going to hold you accountable because you reached qat'. Sometimes you have not reached qat', so you are not accountable. But once you reach qat', you cannot go the opposite direction.
So does that mean, say, then if you have this rule, then that evidence, the verbal evidence, must have some defect then in it, right?
Not defect. See, the non-explicit is what? What do we call the non-explicit?
Zanni.
Yes, but we gave it a name. If you remember, I started the class with it. Dhuhur. When it is not explicit, it becomes dhuhur. Okay? And dhuhur carries how many possibility?
Not 100%.
Many.
Many possibilities. So we are taking the stronger one among them. The example of that, the Imam says, do not submerge your head underneath in the water while you are fasting. This do not usually is what? Is hurma, don't. But because it is contradicted with something that says it is okay, then we don't take it as hurma, we take it as what? Karaha. And this is what we call dhuhur. Okay? So dhuhur, as you said, it's not 100%. It's not 100%. While the explicit is 100%. So this one, the non-explicit, is dhuhur. Okay? While this one is definite. So when they contradict, you put this one first. Or we said from the beginning, two weeks ago, we said when the explicit and the non-explicit, they conflict, which one you take? The explicit you take. Because the explicit is explicit. While the non-explicit is dhuhur, the impression, not the wording, the impression. There is a difference between wording, the clear wording, and the impression you get from it. I say now, this is the difference. I say to someone, come to my house. And then I say to someone else, please, 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 I want you to come to my house. If you don't come to my house, I'll be upset. I'll be heartbroken. Which sentence is stronger? Real invitation. The second one. The first one you may say, well, because he was embarrassed, he just said, come to my house, but he didn't mean it. Okay? But the second one, 100%. It's 100%. He's asking, he's telling me, if you don't come, I'll be heartbroken, I'll be upset, I don't talk to you. You must come, this, that. So this is a real invitation. While the first one, ta'aruf, just formalities. Yeah. He's not serious. So when these two sentences, they clash, you take the second one. If it is said to the same person, you take the second one. Okay? The second one is very explicit. While the first one, you don't know. Was he serious? Was he not serious? So this is the dhuhur. Dhuhur is the impression. While when he says, you must come, it's very explicit, very specific. He's saying, if you don't come, I'll be upset with you. So he's making assertion here. While in the first one, there is no assertion. There is dhuhur. Okay. Because sometimes the dhuhur becomes hujjah when there is nothing contradicts it. But if the dhuhur is contradicted by an explicit statement, then it is not hujjah anymore. This is what we studied in the beginning, that we have explicit versus dhuhur, apparent. Apparent meaning, okay? This one comes first because the explicit is always hujjah. Okay? The explicit is definite, qat'i. While this one is not qat'i. But the Shari' says, I will okay it as long as it is not contradicted by an explicit ruling. If it is not, take that one, no problem. Take that one, because this is what the aql tells you. The aql says, what did you understand from his sentence? You say, 60% I understood, 60% he was serious, 40% he was not serious. He tells you, okay, take the 60%. But if we have contradicted by no explicit evidence, then you can't go with this one, because this is dhann, this is dhuhur, this is not qata'. This is qata'. Are you with me? So here in this case, the rational one is 100% qata'. So this one cannot stand to that one. This one is defeated, because this is dhuhur, non-explicit. While this one, the Sharia tells, when there is something solid, aqli, a rational ruling, then it cannot be defeated. It cannot be defeated. Now, let's go to the last case. إذا تعارض دليلان من غير الأدلة اللفظية. Now, two evidences both of them are non-verbal. They clash with each other. Non-verbal clashing with non-verbal. They clash. Both of them now. Okay? Can both of them be definite? Both, this one definite and that one definite? Huh?
No.
Both of them non-verbal, both of them definite. Why? But they are non-verbal, not verbal. Look at this, non.
But still
They might be explicit in cases, no?
Hmm?
They're both hujjah, they can't conflict with one another.
But they are non-verbal, not verbal.
Can you give an example?
Taqreer, consent, non-verbal. The Imam saw someone eating this product, so to someone said, it's okay. Another person came and he ate the same product, the Imam said to him, no. Consent. He consented to one of them, he did not consent to the other. Same food, same product.
Well, then the answer is yes, the example that you gave with the situation, it depends on that particular person's situation, then it would be okay.
Okay, same person. Let's say same person. One time he ate, the Imam said to him, don't eat. 1 minute later he ate, the Imam said to him, huh? It cannot happen. I am testing you sometimes. It cannot happen. If both, we cannot say both are definite. Either this is definite or that one. Okay? If one of them is definite, definitely the other one is non-definite. Becomes non-definite. Because they cannot clash. The same thing with the verbal. The same thing that we said with the verbal. Two verbal evidences, both of them are definite, explicit. They cannot clash. They cannot clash. Okay? The same thing with the non-verbal.
But if both of them are non-definitive, then we can ignore both of them.
The non-definitive, they can clash because they are non-definitive.
Yeah, but we should ignore both of them, no?
They say yes. They say إذا تعارض تساقط. We will study this. When they conflict with each other, you ignore both of them. You don't give a preference to one over the other. If they are the same in weight, in value, same in weight and value, you don't give a preference to one over the other. So if one of them was definite, the other is non-definite, then definitely you take the definite one. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will study. Now, so far, we studied the conflict between what? Evidences. Tomorrow, we're going to study the conflict between principles or the procedures, usul. And we said which one comes first, the evidence or the asl, dalil or asl? Why? Without looking at your notes. Why? Exactly. Because dalil, the faqih finds the dalil. What do we mean by dalil? The Quran, the hadith, the verbal and non-verbal. While the dalil, in the absence of Quran and hadith, the evidence, comes the turn of asl. Okay? So we take the evidence first. In the absence of the evidence, we go to the usul. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.